Our topic is watching Jesus at midnight. We're looking at the Passover, starting in Exodus chapter 11. In verses 2 and 3, it talks about the jewels that the Egyptians would give to God's people, the Israelites, and this was actually in repayment for all the years of slavery. When you look at Exodus 12, then in verse 4 it talks about midnight. And it's a prediction about midnight. And Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go into the midst of Egypt." And about midnight, not exactly at midnight, about midnight. And then in verse 5 it says, "And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sits upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts." So, we have here a prediction that about midnight, there would be something that would happen. The firstborn would die, and it would be the leaders, the servants, and the beasts. This is similar to what you find in Ezekiel chapter 9. Then in verse 6 it talks about a great cry, the midnight cry. "And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more." So there was a great cry. So we have midnight. We have the midnight cry. And then in verse 7 it says, "But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that you may know how that the Lord does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel." So there was a difference made between two classes. Okay, now in chapter 12 it describes that the difference actually was because of the blood on the doorposts, which symbolized Jesus, trusting Jesus' sacrifice and what he's doing now in heaven. So this has application to the time that they went through. It has application to when Jesus came and died, and it has application to our time. And then in verse 8 it talks about Pharaoh closing his ears, hardening his heart in verses 9 and 10. And God said that in verse 10 that it was about worship. Pharaoh said, "I will not let you worship. I will not let you go free to worship." So the issue was worship. And then going back to verse 9, God said that his purpose, he gave a promise. "The Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt." So God's purpose, miracle, promise, was to bring freedom, miracles, and wonders. It didn't seem to the Israelites when you read the story. So in this story, we have, when you look at this, midnight, the midnight cry, and you actually have the close of probation as you follow this story in the Sunday law. So when you're thinking about the trumpets giving a certain sound, compare it here. You would line this up here. And actually in verse 12 it gives the line for 9/11 with the warning to the east. I'll talk about that in the next presentation. A correction, that's actually in an earlier chapter. I'll talk about that in the next presentation. So there you have it. Midnight, midnight cry, Sunday law, close of probation. Line upon line, the trumpet will give a certain sound. That's how we want to study. That's how we want to apply this. And it's all about the sanctuary, and it's all about the blood on the doorpost, Christ's blood covering us, his life covering us. So I'm going to turn this off, and then I'm going to come back and do the presentation for Exodus chapter 12. It's an awesome study to see how these things apply today.